people that have really strong perfectionist parts don't want to execute until things are 150% amazing to them. And for perfectionism, there was another coach that said this, and it was like, the world needs more of your B+ work. And I absolutely love that. But if you do have a skills gap, the really important thing is to address that right away and figure out who can teach you those skills in the quickest way possible. Also notice, when are you stacking your calendar back to back to back? Because that's usually a sign of big fucking dreams.
All right then. You got this.
Hey, big fucking dreamers. So pumped to be here with you today to talk about something that I've been hearing a lot over these past few weeks. And I've done some keynote speaking recently. I've had a lot of follow-up calls after, whether that be sales calls or people booking in confidence calls. And I've just heard so many repeating patterns that I really wanted to do an episode on it. And then I also created a mini course on it. And this is the pattern of really losing confidence at work, or something happens, let's say either a trigger like a redundancy happens, or even a promotion happens, or you receive some negative manager feedback, and then you carry that for such a long time, then that really stings, it really sticks, or you feel like you are not really showing up to work in the way that you want to be showing up. So you're shutting down in client meetings, or you're shutting down in front of key stakeholders. And by shutting down, I mean, you're not speaking up, you're not challenging, or you're just getting so nervous and you're almost getting panicked, even when you have been given feedback that you are objectively exceptional. So I wanted to do an episode on the red flags that I start to see when people do lose confidence, but also the things that you can do about it. And like I said, I created a free mini course on this. So it's 4 modules. There are worksheets. It is a culmination of all of my work. The link is in the show notes to sign up. So if you are experiencing one of these red flags, I highly encourage you to sign up for the mini course and you receive access right away. I put a lot of time and energy into it, and I've already heard feedback that it's really amazing and helping people a lot. So let's get right into it. Now, the main pain points that you will experience, if this is relevant to you, is you'll feel like you're losing your edge, but you can't explain why. You feel like true imposter syndrome, even when you have feedback that you are exceptional from leadership. You often feel like you have to overgive or people please to feel valuable. And you also feel like when others succeed, you drop in confidence. So if someone is doing really well, you all of a sudden then think it's an attack on you. You feel like you're not good enough. You feel like you have to prove yourself. I know that's one that I have suffered with in extreme amounts, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So what I will say is that when people talk about confidence, I almost want to distinguish between 2 different things. And that is, sometimes there is a lack of confidence when there will actually be a genuine skills gap. And so you don't necessarily lack confidence, you lack knowledge about how to do the skill. I did an episode previously, I think it was called Imposter Syndrome or Skills Gap. I will link it in the show notes. I highly recommend listening to that because sometimes imposter syndrome is really mislabeled and it's not actually true imposter syndrome. It's not knowing how to do the thing. So let's say you were recently promoted, or you're in a new type of role, or you've just launched your own business and you've left corporate, you're going into entrepreneurship. You are naturally going to have a skills gap. Now, this isn't really what I'm talking about today, but if you do have a skills gap, the really important thing is to address that right away and figure out who can teach you those skills in the quickest way possible. So going back into these red flags that I see when people really struggle with career confidence. So red flag number 1 is going quiet when it really matters most. And that means shutting down in meetings with important stakeholders. This could be shutting down in meetings like a big client pitch, or even in an interview, you all of a sudden are overwhelmed with anxiety. And by shutting down, I mean you go really quiet. You feel like you don't want to contribute anything. You start to spiral. You feel like you lose your voice. And what's really happening is your nervous system is extremely overwhelmed at that point. And if anyone has coached in my programs or they've coached one-on-one with me, they will know that I'm a huge fan of internal family systems therapy. And from an internal family systems therapy perspective, what is happening is this is usually a part that we call a firefighter. Now, there are a few different types of parts. And just a short recap for IFS, I also did a podcast episode on this. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to that episode on internal family systems therapy. I give a breakdown, and that's going to really help you understand understand this, but there are different types of parts in your system. Now, as a coach, I usually work with what's called a manager part. So a manager part is a highly protective part, and this could be your harsh inner critic, or this could be your perfectionist. This could be the martyr, the people pleaser. Those are types of manager parts where they're causing you pain in your system, but they're not really completely overwhelming you. Now, a different type of part is called a firefighter. Now, a firefighter is a part that actually does flood your system, and it almost causes your system to shut down. Now, these firefighters can also look like addiction. So it can look like alcoholism. It could look like shopping addiction, but it could also look like social media consumption. It could look like binging. So when you go into a meeting and you go completely quiet and your system shuts down, or you have a large amount of anxiety that you feel like it's almost paralyzing, that is usually a firefighter presenting in your system. So what you really want to do is to understand why it's there and almost decouple from it, because it will be a protective part of you and it's doing that for a reason. So it probably feels a huge amount of stress, a huge amount of anxiety. So you want to understand why it's there and begin talking to it. Once you almost decouple from this isn't me, this is just a part of me, then you could begin to really work with that. But if that is happening, I would highly recommend going and seeing an IFS coach, going and seeing a therapist about it, because that could mean that there's a huge amount of stress in your system that actually doesn't need to be there and it can be worked through. So the second red flag is really your perfectionism takes over. And usually perfectionism and procrastination are two sides of the same coin. So what I see with people that have really strong perfectionist parts is that they will really hold back and not do things until they're absolutely sure that it's perfect. They will feel like they don't want to turn anything in, or they often will turn something in very last minute because they feel like a huge amount of angst and anxiety. And they over-research, they over-prepare, they get an analysis paralysis, and they don't want to execute until things are 150% amazing to them. What this is really doing is it's like your system is almost going into hypervigilance to feel safe. So you're going into protective overdrive to know that you're okay. And for perfectionism, there was another coach that said this, and it was like, the world needs more of your B+ work. And I absolutely love that for those that are listening not in the US, although I think most people know the US grading system, like an A+ is the top of the grading system, but the B+ is, it's not exceptional, but it's good. And when I think of myself, I used to be a lot more of a perfectionist than I am now. And I'm like pumping out B+ work all the time. I'm recording multiple podcast episodes at once. I have really focused on not being a perfectionist and not being hypervigilant. And what that means is almost like graded exposure to not being perfect. So if you do feel like you have this tendency, what I really would recommend is almost exposure therapy. How is it if you don't over prepare for one meeting? How is it if you turn something in that is not absolutely exceptional, but it's good? And seeing what that does to your system. Because oftentimes, if you're only hesitating, or if you're only putting out work that is absolutely perfect, if you're only making a comment or saying a phrase, if you know that the feedback is going to be really well received, then you're not going to get as many career opportunities as you could, because your output isn't going to be as much. So really try not over preparing and seeing what happens, and then just see little by little if you can really tolerate this. And you want to build the skill set of being okay with things being good, but not absolutely perfect. Because when you are holding yourself at such a high standard of perfectionism, there tends to be a lot more stress and internal pressure. So we really want to start to eliminate that. Red flag number 3 is constant comparison. I know so many people, especially if you are in any type of sales environment, being compared is part of the job. Your numbers are public. You are compared to all your peers. You're stack ranked against all your peers. You're usually fighting for the top 5% or 10% to be in President's Club, whatever that is. So what this looks like is really not feeling proud of your achievements because other people have often done well. Also thinking that people's success is somehow a slight to you, like they're doing it on purpose. They're trying to make you look bad. Everything that someone else does is a reflection of your success. success. And really, the antidote to this is getting super clear on your values. So, what is your value system? What do you care about? What do you prioritize? And then what actions do you take to actually support your values? So, it's not just enough to say, my value is creativity or my value is health, but to really understand, okay, well, what does that mean in day to day life? I have this friend who, in the past few years, has just become extremely successful coaching people at a very high level in tech. And I'm talking like the top in tech. And, she's coaching all of these billionaires. And I know for me that initially, before I had started doing this work, before it was almost infused in my system, I would leave conversations feeling almost small, feeling like a lot worse, feeling less than, feeling like, oh my God, she's coaching all these billionaires and, I'm not coaching any billionaires, like, whatever that is. But then when I started to realize, okay, well, what are my actual values? And my two top values are health and growth. And health, am I looking after my health on a daily basis? Yes, I've gone over this so many times. That means I exercise 3 to 4 times a week. I weightlift. I walk 10,000 steps a day. I meditate. I go to therapy. I journal, whatever that is. Like I really do look after and invest in my health. My schedule reflects that. Then my second top value is growth. Now, I am growing all the time. I'm always expanding in terms of running a business, stretching myself, doing new things, but also creativity is, I would say, a value that sits under growth for me. And I'm heavily involved in my creative work. That means writing my fiction novel. That means taking little mini courses on the side. That means reading fiction that really inspires me, talking to my friends that are in those types of communities, my other writer friends, which I'm meeting up with tonight. Hey, David and Karis, I'm so excited to see you. But if I just go into, people are doing better than me, and usually that metric is based on money or based on some sort of perceived power, there's always going to be people doing better than you. But if you start to anchor on, am I living in my values? What are my values? Have I defined them? And then how am I living them on a day-to-day basis? That comparison will still probably be there, but it's going to be lessened. So then the fourth red flag is that self-doubt is really louder than evidence. This is when you feel like you are objectively exceptional. You're getting that feedback all the time. Your performance metrics could say that. Everyone around you says that you are exceptional of some sort, but you often feel like a loser. You feel stupid. You feel incompetent. You might have voices running in the back of your head saying, I'm stupid or I'm not enough. And this is also going back to parts work. And the reason that I do go back to parts work so much is because it's a way to understand what is your subconscious thinking? How do we get into the subconscious? What's the stories that our subconscious is telling us? And then once you get into that, what we want to do is really name the part, separate it from you, understand who the target part is. And I'm actually going to be coming out with a bonus episode in a few weeks' time, which is a meditation on how to find the part and on how to work with the part. So look out for that. But once you really separate yourself from the part of you that is telling you those stories, because that part of you may be 7 years old, that part of you may be 10 years old, and it could be born out of a trauma or micro trauma or some kid calling you stupid at school or some kid bullying you or a parent telling you you're stupid. And then from that time, you have a belief system that is programmed that will say, despite all evidence, I'm stupid or I'm not enough or I'm dumb or whatever fucking narrative that's going on in your head. But we want to understand why it's there, what it's trying to protect you from, and then how do we unburden it? The fifth red flag is really people pleasing to prove your worth. So this is what I call the overgiving part or the martyrdom. Usually people pleasers will almost have these types of roles in their family system. So their family of origin, they will somehow be forced into a people-pleasing role, whether that was caretaking a parent that was sick, or you had a sibling that was really quite active and destructive even. So you became small, you became quiet, you became really helpful. That's part of your identity. And what that will look like is overgiving at work, avoiding difficult conversations, being harder on yourself than anyone else. And you're always the martyr. You're always the one overgiving. So in this situation, what you want to do is introduce these micro boundaries. And I know that if you've listened to this podcast, a lot of this stuff can be repetitive because it does take a lot of repetition to get into your subconscious mind and to start changing. So a micro boundary could just be saying like, over the holidays are coming up. So you might be getting invited to a lot of different holiday parties. Maybe there's a lot of family events. Like you don't want to go to all of them. You actually want to rest. If you're in Australia, maybe you want to go to the beach at summertime, or if you are in the US, it's wintertime, whatever you want to do there. But just practice saying, I actually really don't want to go to this, or I don't want to go to that event, or I'm not going to schedule 3 events in one night and try to get to everything. I'm just actually going to be present. Also notice, when are you stacking your calendar back to back to back? Because that's usually a sign of overgiving, usually a sign of people pleasing, usually a sign of martyrdom. So how can you stop doing that? How can you be really focused just on one event? This is extremely important to really recognize which part of you is running the show, which part of you is experiencing this type of low confidence. Also to differentiate, like I said at the beginning, is this an actual skills gap, or is this something that I don't know how to do that I need to actually learn? Or is it a real confidence issue in that I have a part of me that's flared, a part of me that's overwhelming the system, that's really activated, that I need to work on and that I need to understand? So really differentiating the two. Now, like I said, I do have a free career confidence reset. It's a free course. I highly recommend everyone getting that. I go over a lot of these principles, but then more importantly, I give you the workbook to work through all of these things so that you will be heightened, you will be aware of it. It is full of such goodness, really good at having direct conversations as well. And even if you've been told that you have low confidence or you have poor executive presence, and that's a reason that you're not getting promoted, or that's a reason that you're not moving forward in your career, this course addresses that as well. So sign up for that. Link is in the show notes. And we do have a special announcement coming next week. So I am super excited. There's going to be something super fun coming next week. So look out for that. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast as well to get those. And it also really helps. Tell a friend about this episode. I put so much work into it. I've got a team working on it as well. We're really investing very heavily in the podcast that it grows. So if this was helpful, tell a friend, share it on your Instagram stories, share it on LinkedIn. I really appreciate that. So big fucking dreamers, I hope that you gain more confidence from listening to this episode, and I will see you soon.
Big fucking dream.